The office was buzzing that morning. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, coffee machines hissed. It felt like the air itself was vibrating with nervous energy. For weeks, everyone had whispered about the big announcement. A new senior manager was about to be named, and everyone knew there were only two real contenders, me and her. I had spent the last 5 years pouring every ounce of myself into this company. Late nights, canceled weekends, extra projects that no one else wanted. I had done it all. And not just done it, I had excelled. My boss often called me the backbone of the department. My team trusted me. Even clients called me directly, skipping the official channels, because they knew I got things done. That's why I walked into the conference room with a quiet confidence. Today was supposed to be the day my sacrifices finally paid off. Then she walked in. Melissa Carter, the picture of polished charm. Perfectly tailored suit, flawless hair, that practiced smile she wore like armor. She had joined the company only 2 years ago, but somehow she had clawed her way up the ladder with frightening speed. I knew her type, sweet on the surface, venom underneath. She wasn't half as hardworking as me, but she was cunning. She knew how to flatter, how to make her presence known in meetings without saying anything of substance, how to take credit for work done by others. And worst of all, she had started taking credit for my work. I had caught her before, slipping my ideas into presentations, mentioning strategies I had brainstormed late at night, as if they were her own. The last time it happened, I told myself to be patient. I thought, management knows the truth. They'll see through her. But as our director, Mr. Hughes, walked into the room with that proud smile and shiny announcement envelope, my stomach twisted. Something felt wrong. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing across the table, "it gives me great pleasure to announce our new senior manager of operations." He paused. My chest tightened. My palms grew damp. "Melissa Carter!" The room erupted in polite applause. Melissa gasped, covering her mouth like she hadn't expected it, like this wasn't the plan she had been orchestrating for months. She stood, shook Mr. Hughes's hand, and pretended to wipe away a tear. I felt my heart crack. The faces around the room blurred. Applause turned into ringing in my ears. I sat frozen, staring at her, while she looked directly at me across the table. Her lips curled into the faintest smirk, so quick no one else would notice. That smirk was her confession. She knew what she had done. She knew she had stolen what was mine, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't clap. I didn't smile. I didn't congratulate her. I just whispered silently to myself, "You've taken my promotion, Melissa, but I swear on everything you will regret it." What I didn't realize then was that this betrayal wasn't just a stolen promotion. It was the spark that would ignite the darkest fire inside me, the kind of fire that doesn't stop until it consumes everything in its path. And Melissa Carter was about to learn that when you play dirty, you eventually meet someone willing to play dirtier. Want to know Melissa's secret? I stared at the subject line for what felt like an eternity. Melissa's secret? My first instinct was suspicion. Could this be spam? A cruel prank? Or worse, Melissa herself testing me? But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and mine was burning. With trembling fingers, I clicked. The email was short, cryptic. "If you want the truth about how Melissa really got her promotion, meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m., corner of 5th and Willow. Come alone, no name, no signature, just a location and time." My mind spun with possibilities. Who could this be? A coworker fed up with Melissa's games? An old enemy of hers? Or maybe someone from management, riddled with guilt. All night I tossed and turned. The thought of her smirk haunted me. But now it was layered with the promise of answers. If there was dirt on Melissa, real dirt, I could use it. I could destroy her the way she had destroyed me. The next evening, I arrived at the corner of 5th and Willow. It was a quiet spot, the kind of place that felt like the city had forgotten it existed. A flickering streetlight buzzed above, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. That's when I saw him. A man in a faded gray suit, leaning against a lamppost. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes darted nervously, scanning the street. "You came," he said when I approached. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "Doesn't matter," he replied quickly. What matters is that I know things about Melissa, things that could ruin her. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. My eyes widened as he handed it to me. Inside were printed emails, text screenshots, even photographs, and with every page I turned, my jaw dropped further. Melissa had been having a secret relationship with none other than Mr. Hughes, our director, the very man who had announced her promotion. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. Suddenly everything made sense. Her rapid climb, the way management seemed blind to her flaws. The smirk she gave me, it wasn't just arrogance. It was the arrogance of someone who knew the system was rigged in her favor. My fists clenched. Rage coursed through me like poison. She slept her way to the top, I whispered, disgust curling my lips. The man leaned closer, and if this ever got out, it wouldn't just ruin her career. It would destroy Hughes, too. For a moment, I hesitated. This was dangerous. To use this kind of weapon could backfire. But then I saw her smirk in my mind again. The humiliation I felt that day. The years of work she had stolen from me. And a dark, cold determination settled over me. "I'll take it," I said, gripping the folder tightly. The man gave a quick nod and melted into the shadows, leaving me alone under the flickering streetlight, the folder heavy in my hands. I walked home, my mind already racing, already plotting. Melissa thought she had won. But she had no idea that I now held the knife that could cut her world to pieces. And standing there, uninvited, was Melissa herself. The sight of her standing there froze me. Melissa, perfect, polished, smiling as if she hadn't ripped my world apart just days ago. Her eyes sparkled with that same practiced charm, but I could see something behind them. Nervousness, a flicker of caution. "Surprised to see me?" she said, tilting her head like a cat that had cornered a mouse. My grip on the door tightened. Behind me, the kitchen table was littered with the evidence I had just received. Emails, photos, text messages. If she saw them, my entire advantage would vanish. I forced a smile. "Melissa, this is unexpected. Can I come in?" she asked smoothly, already stepping forward before I had the chance to refuse. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed, "Don't let her in." But slamming the door in her face would only raise suspicion. So, I stepped aside, keeping my movements calm, hiding the storm raging inside me. She walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the floor. She glanced around casually, as if she were assessing me, not my apartment. "You've been quiet at the office," she said, turning back to me. "No congratulations, no words at all. I was starting to wonder if you were upset." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes were sharp as knives. I shrugged, masking my fury. "Upset? Why would I be upset?" Melissa laughed softly, the kind of laugh that dripped with condescension. "Oh, come on. We both know how badly you wanted that promotion. But you see," she stepped closer, lowering her voice, "wanting and deserving aren't the same thing." Her words sliced through me. My nails dug into my palms. She was testing me, toying with me. Then her eyes flicked toward the kitchen. My heart skipped. She was moving closer to the table. "Melissa," I said firmly, stepping between her and the evidence. "What do you really want?" Her smile faltered for a split second. That was it, the crack in her armor. "I just thought," she began, feigning innocence, "that we should keep things friendly. I wouldn't want any tension between us. It's bad for the team, you know." Translation. She knew I could be a threat, and she was right. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Don't worry, Melissa. I'm not upset. In fact," I let a thin smile curl my lips. "I'm glad you came." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't know if I was bluffing, or if I knew something she didn't. And that uncertainty, it rattled her. She muttered some excuse about a dinner reservation and left, her heels echoing down the hall. I shut the door, my chest heaving. She suspected me. Maybe not much, but enough. And that meant my window of opportunity to strike was closing fast. I turned back to the folder on my table. The evidence glared at me under the dim light. Melissa had played her move, now. It was my turn. Careful. She's not working alone. The message sent a shiver down my spine. Not working alone? What did that mean? I typed back quickly. Who are you? No response. I tried again. What do you mean? Who else is involved? Still nothing. Just silence. I tossed the phone down, frustration burning in my veins. If Melissa wasn't working alone, then someone else in the company had a stake in this game. Someone powerful enough to help cover her tracks. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the text in my mind, layering it over the evidence, over Melissa's smug smile at my door. By dawn, I knew one thing. I needed to move faster. The next morning at work, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. My head was high, my face calm, but inside, every nerve was taut, waiting. Melissa was already there, standing in her new glass-walled office. She waved at me through the transparent wall with a smile that was all teeth. I waved back politely. Let her think I was harmless. But as I walked past, I noticed something strange. Sitting in her office with her was Mr. Daniels, the company's CFO. Daniels was quiet, calculating, and known for keeping to himself. He rarely mingled with anyone outside the finance department. So why was he in her office, talking in hushed tones, leaning in too close? The pieces began to fit together. Melissa wasn't just sleeping with Hughes. She had Daniels on her side too. That explained the text. That explained how she had climbed so quickly. She wasn't a lone schemer. She was part of a web, and webs can be untangled. During lunch, I slipped away to the archives room, a place most employees avoided. Dusty, dim, filled with rows of old files, but it was also where I could dig without being seen. I started pulling Daniel's financial reports. If he was backing Melissa, there had to be a reason. And sure enough, after hours of cross-checking, I found it. Tiny discrepancies, hidden transfers, numbers that didn't add up. Daniels wasn't just helping Melissa. He was funneling money through company accounts. Embezzlement. My pulse quickened. If I could connect Melissa to Daniels, I wouldn't just ruin her. I'd bring down her entire empire. But I had to be careful. One wrong move and they'd both bury me before I could act. That night, as I copied the incriminating files onto a hidden USB, I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun around. Heart hammering. Standing in the shadows of the archive room was Melissa. Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. Working late, are we? She said softly. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink. Melissa stood there in the half-light of the archive room, holding a file with my name stamped across it in bold letters. Funny, she said, tapping the folder with her manicured nails. I didn't know you were the type to spend evenings digging through company archives. I forced myself to stay calm. And I didn't know you were the type to stalk coworkers after hours, she smirked. Touché. Then she stepped closer, holding the file out just enough for me to see inside. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just a file. It was my personnel record. Notes from supervisors, copies of projects, even my performance reviews. But tucked inside, I saw something else. Something I hadn't realized was still on record. A complaint. Years ago, in my first year at the company, I had snapped at a senior colleague during a heated project deadline. It hadn't been my proudest moment, and I thought it was buried, but apparently Melissa had dug it up. Temper issues, she said softly, almost playfully, flipping the page. Not exactly the kind of thing that screams management material, does it? My fist tightened at my sides. That was years ago. It was resolved. Maybe, she said, tilting her head. But if you were, say, under review again, I'm sure HR would love to revisit this little pattern. Her voice was calm, but the threat was sharp as glass. I stepped forward, lowering my tone. Why are you really here, Melissa? She smiled, leaning in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. Because I know you're digging, and I'm here to tell you, stop. You can't win this game. Not against me, I laughed bitterly. You're right. Alone, I can't. Her eyes flickered. Just a moment of doubt. She hadn't expected me to admit it. Good, she said quickly, trying to reassert control. Then let's keep things professional. You do your job, I'll do mine. And maybe, just maybe, I'll forget that I saw you snooping tonight. With that, she tucked the file under her arm and walked away. her heels clicking like gunshots in the empty hall. I exhaled shakily, my hands trembling as I shoved the USB into my pocket. She had tried to intimidate me, but she had also tipped her hand. She was watching me, afraid of me. That meant I was close, too close for her comfort, and that was exactly where I wanted to be. We've scheduled a mandatory meeting to discuss concerns regarding your recent performance. The words burned on my screen. A meeting with HR. Concerns about my performance. Melissa had made her move. All morning, I struggled to focus. My coworkers chattered around me, oblivious to the silent war unfolding in the shadows of our corporate world. Every glance at the glass walls of Melissa's office made my blood boil. She sat there calm, radiant in her stolen throne, sipping her latte like a queen, confident no one could challenge her rule. But she was wrong. When I stepped into the HR office later that afternoon, the air was cold. Ms. Reed, the HR manager, greeted me with a stiff smile. "Please sit down," she said. I did, keeping my expression neutral. She folded her hands. "We've had some concerns raised about your conduct, specifically a history of temper issues." My jaw tightened. History, not recent events. She was pulling my old record, the very same file Melissa had waved in my face. "Ms. Reed," I said evenly, "that incident was years ago. It was resolved. I've never had another issue since." "Yes, I see that," she admitted, glancing at the file. "But given your recent tension with senior staff, it seemed important to review." There it was. Recent tension with senior staff. Melissa had poisoned the well. I leaned forward slightly. With respect, I've always been professional. But if certain staff members feel threatened by my presence, perhaps that says more about them than about me. Ms. Reed raised an eyebrow, but didn't push further. She closed the file. "For now, this is just a reminder. Keep your conduct exemplary and this won't go further." I thanked her politely and left. But inside, my fury was volcanic. Melissa had tried to corner me, to discredit me before I could strike. But she had underestimated me. That night, I sat in my apartment with the USB plugged into my laptop, staring at Daniel's financial reports. The embezzlement trail was clear. All I had to do was tie Melissa into it. Then it hit me. The emails, the folder I had been given, Melissa's messages to Hughes. If she had been reckless enough to communicate with Daniels in the same way, then somewhere there was proof, and I knew exactly where to find it, the company servers. But breaking into them wasn't something I could do alone. I needed help, someone who hated Melissa as much as I did. And there was one person who came to mind immediately. Jenna. She had been my closest ally at work, sharp, loyal, and just as fed up with Melissa's manipulations. She also happened to be a genius with IT. The next day, I found her in the break room. "Jenna," I whispered, lowering my voice. "I need to talk to you, off the record." She studied me, then nodded. That evening, we met at a quiet cafe away from the office. I laid it all out. The promotion theft, the affair with Hughes, the embezzlement trail, the anonymous warnings. Her eyes widened, but there was no disbelief. "Only anger. I knew she was dirty," Jenna muttered. "But this is bigger than I thought. Can you help me?" I asked. "Can you get into Daniel's email records? If I can connect her to him, I can bring them both down." Jenna leaned back thinking. Then she smirked. "I can do it. But if we get caught, we're finished." "We won't get caught," I said firmly. "Melissa thinks she's winning. That's our advantage." She nodded slowly. "All right, let's burn her empire to the ground." On the screen was an email Melissa had sent just 2 days ago, and it wasn't to Hughes or Daniels. It was about me. Jenna's fingers hovered over her laptop like a pianist about to strike a final decisive chord. The cafe hummed around us, low conversation, the clink of cups, but all of that softened to a distant murmur. On her screen, the email inbox glowed, thread after thread of corporate life, until she opened the one that made her face go white. "This is it," she whispered. She enlarged the message. It came from Melissa's account, timestamped 2 days earlier. The subject line was bland. Plan for next week. But the content was surgical, precise, and cruel. We need to finish him. HR will be receptive if we present a pattern. Plant the file in his desk, the incident, the old complaint, and make sure it's visible in shared folders. Mr. Hughes will mention the workload pressure in the meeting. Daniels will provide the cover financials. If Reed needs convincing, show her the temper notes as refreshed. I'll handle the talk with legal. He's been a thorn for too long. Tonight, the mailroom will mistakenly scan his personal documents into shared drives, make it look like he's trying to sabotage himself. My stomach dropped. The email read like a recipe for ruin, not just for me, but for anyone who crossed Melissa. The way she casually described staging evidence made my blood run cold. She didn't just retaliate. She planned with calm precision. Jenna pushed the laptop closer. She's not just reactive, she said. She weaponizes HR. That line, make it look like he's trying to sabotage himself. That's a framing operation, Moise. She's planning to plant evidence that looks like it came from you. Tonight? The word felt heavy. The cafe's clock ticked louder than it should have. Sweat prickled at my temples. Yes, Jenna said. Tonight, the mailroom will scan his personal documents into shared drives. That means they intend to manipulate the digital trail, leave fingerprints that point to you. A cold fury erupted. The idea of being framed, of being the architect of my own downfall, made my hands tremble. All those years of hard work, stripped away by a staged smear. Not just career, but reputation, references, possibly my future in the industry. I thought of the HR meeting email that had already landed in my inbox. The timing was too neat. Melissa, Daniels, Hughes, a small cabal moving chess pieces. They had resources, access, and the willingness to lie. Who else knows about this? I asked. Jenna scanned the email headers, the CC list. Only internal addresses, she murmured. It's been kept tight. But look at the metadata. She sent it from the office earlier, during lunch. That's bold. She's certain no one will leak it, or she's certain no one will stop her. A knot formed in my gut. If they could orchestrate such a thing inside the company, what was stopping them from manufacturing more? I thought of my friends, my colleagues who trusted me. How many of them would believe a neat digital trail pointing to me? The thought was suffocating. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the plan settling over us. Then Jenna leaned in, eyes fierce. We don't wait for them to act, she said. We act first. I wanted to believe that was the right answer. Strike before they could plant their evidence. Expose the embezzlement, the affair, the collusion, all in one clean sweep. But the email told me they anticipated moves like that. They were careful. They had control. What's the plan? I asked, steadier than I felt. Jenna's plan was cold, efficient, and dangerous. Everything this war had become. We would intercept the mailroom scans. We would replace the fabricated files with real evidence tying Melissa to Daniels and Hughes. We'd copy every incriminating email and every illicit transfer into a folder and send it anonymously to the board and to a journalist we both trusted. If they tried to frame me, we'd frame the conspiracy. And if we get caught? I asked. The cost of failure loomed large. Not just jobless. Legal trouble. Black marks. The type of ruin that stayed with a person. Then we'd go down fighting, Jenna said. But we won't get caught. Not if we're smart. Her jaw tightened. I can cover our tracks. I can make it look like we were checking server integrity or doing a security sweep. But we work tonight, at midnight. My pulse thudded. Midnight. The hour they had chosen for their mailroom scam. The hour I'd always associated with the city's softest, most dangerous hush. We left the cafe with our decision set like iron. We were two ordinary people stepping into a war engineered by corporate predators. I felt fear, yes. A deep animal fear that rose in my throat. But it mingled with something darker, more compelling. A hunger for justice, for retribution that finally felt righteous instead of vindictive. That night at home, I packed simple things. A spare shirt, a small backpack, Jenna's USB with the Daniels files already copied, and the folder full of the Melissa Hughes screenshots. I had no illusions that we were purely noble. We were driven by pain, and the ugly need to correct an injustice. But I told myself it didn't matter what fueled us. What mattered was the outcome. When midnight blinked its way onto my clock, We slipped into the building like ghosts. Jenna's keycard worked. She used IT access to bypass a lot of the usual restrictions. The fluorescent lights in the hall hummed. The elevators sighed. The office felt wrong at that hour. Intimate, overfamiliar, like a stage after the curtain had fallen. We moved like trained thieves, quiet, decisive. Jenna opened the mailroom door with a professional bypass. The room smelled of paper and toner and the faint metallic scent of recycling bins. The mailroom clerk we'd seen earlier in the night, a man named Raj, was nowhere in sight. "Where is everyone?" I hissed. Jenna's fingers flew across her laptop. "He's on a break. There's a camera at the corner, but I can loop it for 6 minutes. That's our window. We had 6 minutes. That was all. We found the scanner station." Jenna's hands were steady as she booted the interface. She loaded our USB and configured the routing protocols. Simple code, elegant steps. My heart hammered as she navigated directories until she found the folder they used for personal documents. Her face went pale. "They've already prepped a queue," she breathed. "Someone scheduled scans to upload at 12:15. My throat closed. 12:15. That meant we needed to act faster. Jenna worked with a ferocious focus. She swapped a file, hid traces, queued our leaked folder, the one with the embezzlement trail and incriminating emails, to be sent to multiple recipients, the board members, the journalist contact, and a secure cloud that would timestamp everything externally. In one motion, she also planted a decoy, a benign maintenance file that looked like a system check to mask our true intentions. We were almost finished when the scanner whirred. Someone was coming, footsteps in the hallway. The camera, though looped, recorded new movement. "Hide," Jenna whispered. We ducked behind a stack of boxes, breath shallow, hearts punching. The door opened and a silhouette filled the threshold. Raj, the mailroom clerk, bleary-eyed, holding a coffee. He blinked, switched on the scanner, and started the routine. Something in his posture made me flinch. He wasn't alone. Behind him, a figure slipped, a shadow at first, then a woman in a dark coat. She moved with the casual control of someone who belonged in this underworld of midnight exchanges. Melissa. My mouth went dry. She scanned the room with a predator's gaze, and then her eyes locked onto the scanner's screen. She walked to Raj, whispered something. His face crumpled. He nodded, hands trembling. Melissa's lips curved. She looked straight at the stack where Jenna and I were, hidden only for a second, but that glance carried the kind of recognition that tore through my skin like heat. We had been seen. Time constricted to the precise ticks between Raj's words and the inevitable footsteps. My brain tried to calculate escape routes while my body froze. Panic is a selfish companion. It narrows vision and speeds up breath. I could see Jenna's eyes, bright, terrified, and furious all at once. Melissa's smile widened like a knife. She turned and spoke into her sleeve, a quick, professional whisper that made the hair on my neck stand up. "Do it quietly. No scenes." Raj moved toward us, but Jenna was faster. She pushed one of the cardboard stacks, scattering envelopes and stationery in a paper storm. Alarms in my chest roared as we bolted, lunging for the mailroom door. The corridor was a maze of glass cubicles and potted plants. I could hear the muffled thundering of security boots down the hall. The company's internal team had a ridiculously quick response time for after-hours disturbances. Melissa was calling someone now, her voice crisp, calm, the voice of someone already scripting her defense. We sprinted, knocking over a display, sliding under a glass partition. Jenna's breath came hard. She was light on her feet. I could feel the sweat on my back soak my shirt. The building seemed suddenly theatrical, all angles and sightlines designed to trap us. We reached the stairwell and descended 2 flights, thinking a secondary exit would offer freedom. But at the basement landing, a shadow blocked the emergency exit. A security guard, flashlight cutting the darkness. He was young, tired-looking, and not particularly menacing, but he had a radio and a badge and rules to follow. "Hold it right there," he said, voice professional but shocked. "What are you doing down here?" I opened my mouth to explain, to say anything that might diffuse the scene. Before I could form a sentence, another radio burst, low, urgent. "Suspected unauthorized access in mailroom. 2 persons seen fleeing towards stairwell. The guard's eyes hardened. Protocol slid into place. We were caught in the net we'd hoped to avoid. The cold became a kind of physical pressure. Metal and glass and the corporate machine grinding toward judgment. Everything all right? A voice behind us asked. We turned. Melissa stood at the top of the stairwell, flanked by Mr. Daniels and Mr. Hughes. They looked immaculate, their expressions a study in corporate contempt. Melissa's presence was like a conductor holding a baton. With a single movement, she made the scene feel orchestrated, inevitable. Found them. Daniels asked to the security guard. Yes, sir, he replied. He didn't look at us with hostility so much as duty. He had a job, and this job gave him a script to follow. I swallowed, voice hoarse. We were just looking for... You were attempting to tamper with mailroom equipment, Hughes cut in, his voice cold and public. We have a record of the scheduled scan. You were seen editing cues and loading unauthorized storage devices. You are under internal investigation. The words struck like a hammer. My hands flew to my pockets, to the USB Jenna had slipped inside my jacket. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. You can't do this, I started. But my protest sounded thin and childish. Melissa stepped forward, holding my personnel file as if it were a trophy. She flicked through the pages with bored amusement. He's been unstable, she said, voice loud enough that the stairwell echoed. We documented incidents showing a pattern of aggressive behavior. Hours ago, I sent HR a note asking them to review his access and conduct. It appears he attempted to manipulate company records tonight. Security detain him for questioning. And her, she nodded toward Jenna, will need IT to examine her devices. I felt a coldness spread through me, a sensation like winter moving from the tips of my fingers inward. This had been their plan all along. Bait, frame, arrest. The email had hinted at it, but the reality was worse. They had mapped my moves, predicted my desperation, and preempted me with their own contingency. Wait, I said, lunging. You can't just... Hughes smiled, a thin, controlled smile that made my stomach twist. We can and we will, he said. You should have been more careful. Security led us down to a small interview room, fluorescent lights buzz screaming above. The antiseptic smell was sharp, clinical. They sat us across from Ms. Reed from HR, who folded her hands and opened a fresh file. Her face was the personification of institutional neutrality. She addressed us not as colleagues, but as defendants in a minor tribunal. We found unauthorized scans queued at midnight, she said. The scanner logged your badge access at 12:14 a.m., Mr. Chand. She slid a printout across the table. My breath hitched as I looked at the timestamp. There it was, my badge ID, my access code, a precise minute when, according to their logs, I had entered the mailroom. That was the final turn of the knife. Someone had used my credentials, fabricated a digital trail to pin this on me. Or worse, they had forced Raj to claim he'd seen us and altered logs to match. The system that had once felt like a friend, corporate IT, access control, audit trails, had become a weapon. I tried to explain. I told them about the email, about Jenna's findings, about the embezzlement. I showed the screenshots, the transfer records, the folder. Ms. Reed's face didn't change. If you have evidence, file it with legal, she said. Security will review it. For now, this meeting is documented. The guard's gaze was weary and sympathetic in the way strangers often are when they witness someone else's fall. Jenna clutched my hand under the table, a brief anchor amid the professional betrayal. We exchanged a look, anger, grief, and a flicker of something like determination. We weren't finished. Not yet, then my phone buzzed. I reached for it automatically, half expecting more bad news. The message was short, anonymous. You should have let it go. Next time it won't be a meeting. It'll be worse. My stomach lurched. The anonymous threat was a final improvised detail, a reminder that the stakes were larger than I'd thought. These were not just petty corporate players. They had muscle, reach, and a taste for silencing dissent. The building hushed like a forest before a storm. Section 9. The Leak and the Night the Office. Broke. When the image with my name lit up the foyer monitor, the building's hum turned into a single held breath. People whispered. Phones came out. A dozen heads swiveled to the glass doors. The security guard who'd escorted us looked like a man who'd been punched. One hand on his radio, the other useless at his side. Jenna gripped my wrist so hard my pulse jumped. "We have to move," she hissed. Now, but moving felt meaningless. The damage had been done in public. The entire company, every contractor, every temp, every executive had seen the label, security risk. If the board believed it, my career was over before I could prove otherwise. They led us down the corridor like two marked animals. HR handed me a suspension notice, thick with corporate language designed to make the end sound administrative and justified. The words blurred. People I'd known for years kept their faces politely neutral, the way strangers do when they're watching a slow, sanctioned collapse. Outside the glass doors, the city had become louder. I had imagined that exposing Melissa would be a clean, triumphant thing. An email sent, a story published, lights turned on. In reality, it felt like walking into a storm while someone else controlled the barometer. But Jenna had moved faster than I could see. During the humiliation, she'd slipped a copy of the Daniels files and the Melissa Hughes screenshots to an old contact of hers, Adil, the journalist we'd planned on. He had called immediately, voice clipped but steady. "I'm live in 10, he'd whispered. "Send me everything, now." We were pushed out the front doors like commoners. That stinging cool air felt both freeing and punishing. Phones buzzed with messages, concern, curiosity, some with that sudden digital cruelty that spreads before truth has a chance to breathe. Someone had already tweeted a photo of the foyer screen. The hashtag began to unfurl. We rode the elevator down in silence. Jenna kept checking her phone. "Adil's on it," she said finally, eyes bright with something like hope. "He's putting together the documents. He wants to run it as an exclusive." Hope felt like a brittle thing. Still, it was something. We went to a tiny diner across the street, the kind that stays open too late and knows its regulars by name. Jenna and I sat in a booth with the weight of the world pressing into the vinyl. We had a plan. Get the evidence public. Tie Melissa to Daniels and Hughes with contractual proof, bank transfers, and the emails. If the board and the public could see the threads, the narrative of me as a security risk would look like the smear it was. Adil arrived 10 minutes later with a laptop and a face that had been sharpened by late nights chasing stories. He'd already pulled up the files Jenna had sent him. "This is messy," he said, "but it's clean. Transfers, flagged accounts, and a clear trail to Daniels. The Hughes emails are the kicker. We can run this within the hour. We worked through the night." Adil wrote a careful piece, one that didn't sound vengeful but authoritative. Transcripts, screenshots, timestamps, and the bank records Jenna had pulled from Daniels's discretionary accounts. He reached out to the board's legal counsel to request comment, giving them a chance to respond before publication, the journalist code obliging him to fairness. At 3:12 a.m., the piece went live. For a moment I felt nothing. Then my phone exploded, notifications cascading like glass. The story spread like a virus with a conscience. People shared it with a mix of outrage and whispered satisfaction. Comments appeared, how could they? Finally, someone called them out. What happens to Moe's? The hashtag changed direction. Instead of security risk, the company's name trended with accusations of corruption. Minutes turned into an electric history. The board held an emergency meeting. The company's PR machine scrabbled for a statement that wasn't laughable. "We take these allegations seriously," they said in a release no one believed. The CFO, Daniels, went silent. Hughes issued a terse statement about personal matters and recusing himself pending review. Melissa's profile vanished from LinkedIn as if someone had pulled a thread and made her identity unravel. But the victory tasted complex. Public exposure had bought us breathing room, but it hadn't yet translated into institutional justice. Instead of a neat collapse, the company went into a war footing. Lawyers called. Security refiled our case with new vigor. The same systems that had tried to trap us were now scrambling to bury their own mistakes. Then, at dawn, my phone rang. It was Raj, the mailroom clerk. I recognized his number from the scanner logs. He sounded small and raw. He began. "They told me to say you were there. They promised help, a payout. They said I'd be safe if I cooperated. I'm sorry. His confession was jagged, but it was a confession. He'd been scared straight by Melissa's reach. "Who promised you help?" I asked. "Daniels," he whispered. "He said keep quiet and we'll cover you. He told me if anyone asks, I say I saw you." I closed my eyes. Fear was a contagion, one that infected the weak and the strong alike. But Raj's words were another thread we could hold. He'd been a pawn, but now he was a witness. Adil wanted to talk to him, to record his statement, to build the narrative of coercion. We spent the day building the case outward, gathered more witness statements, leaked more documents, and urged the board to appoint an independent investigator. The company's stock dipped, then dived. The pressure on Daniels and Hughes ratcheted. Melissa issued a press release denying all charges and implying I had fabricated the story out of spite. Classic spin, predictable. Then the unexpected happened. An anonymous package arrived at Adil's newsroom. Inside, there were video files. Grainy surveillance from a private parking lot showing Daniels and Melissa meeting late at night, exchanging envelopes. The metadata matched times and dates we already had. It was the kind of corroboration that makes denials look like flimsy costumes. Adil published the videos with caution, framing them as corroborative evidence to the documents we'd already presented. The narrative was no longer one of a vindictive employee versus a powerful woman. It was a coordinated conspiracy with money trails and physical exchanges. By the end of the week, the board had no choice. An external law firm took the case. Daniels was placed on leave. Hughes resigned amid growing public fury. Melissa was suspended pending the full investigation. Regulators opened inquiries. The building that had once felt like a fortress began leaking. And me? I watched it all with a strange mixture of triumph and exhaustion. I had wanted revenge, yes, but not as an end in itself. I wanted to be seen as I was, wronged, resilient, not a scapegoat. The exposure had done that in ways I'd barely dared to imagine. The last shell company was the kind of thing accountants build when they want to hide a truth behind paperwork. It existed on paper and registrar databases, with a web of name changes and director proxies meant to confuse anyone who tried to follow the money. Jenna and Adil dove into it like detectives on adrenaline. Days blurred into a high-focus haze. We traced a faint glimmer, an intermediary bank in another country, a small auditing firm that handled offshore accounts. Adil worked his contacts. Jenna used her IT skills to pull more logs. I made phone calls to legal friends, to ex-colleagues who owed me small favors. The net tightened. Then, in a way that felt almost cinematic, it snapped. A whistleblower within Daniels' finance team, someone Daniels had thought he'd bought or bullied into silence, sent us internal transfer confirmations showing payments to the shell company. The sums were significant. The invoices were ridiculous. The recipients were anonymous. The pattern was undeniable. The board reconvened, this time in public and under cameras. The external law firm issued a statement. They had found sufficient cause to recommend criminal inquiry. Regulators and the National Tax Authority opened investigations. The police in our jurisdiction began their own probe into embezzlement and conspiracy. Melissa's legal team scrambled to push back, attacking source credibility and digging for dirt. They tried to paint Adil as a sensationalist journalist, and me as a vengeful ex-employee with an agenda. Classic tactics, but the evidence had volume and clarity. Emails stamped with internal server times, bank transfers, witness testimonies, and the grainy parking lot videos. Each piece of the puzzle reinforced the other. In the weeks that followed, Daniels was arrested. Hughes, who had tried to manage the fall with one last mea culpa, faced public disgrace and an inquiry into negligence and abuse of power. Melissa's suspension turned into a termination as the company moved to distance itself from the scandal. She tried to claw back her reputation, filing countersuits, but the momentum had shifted. People messaged me. Old colleagues sent notes of apology. Some offered quiet, reluctant support. Others kept their distance. The world felt small and large at once. Small because it was filled with the same faces. Large because those faces had the power to remake my life. Adil's coverage earned him acclaim. His newsroom servers were briefly flooded with threats from anonymous trolls loyal to the empire we'd toppled. Jenna took a leave from work after the dust settled. She said she needed space, that the fight had hollowed something inside her. As for me, I sat in a tiny, rented office with a window that looked over a street that had been the backdrop for my worst and most defining weeks. The company had offered a settlement, reach an agreement, and we'd both walk away with money and non-disclosure. They wanted quiet, absolution, a way to sanitize a scandal. I thought about it. The money would be useful. The silence would be comfortable. But money doesn't fix the way trust fractures, and silence would leave them with the power to keep doing what they did. So I refused. Instead, I accepted a different offer, one from a small but growing media consultancy that had been watching the story. They wanted someone who knew both sides of the camera, someone who could help companies protect themselves from corruption, and help whistleblowers tell their stories with the safety of a proper legal and PR strategy. It was the opposite of the corporate machine I'd left. It felt like a new purpose. The months that followed were quieter, measured. Investigations continued. Several indictments were filed. The auditors who had turned a blind eye were fired. The board underwent a reshuffle. The company's stock took years to recover, but it recovered with new governance, stricter oversight, and a humbled leadership, because a scandal had exposed the cost of unchecked ambition. Melissa? She disappeared from the glossy rooftop parties and executive retreats. I heard rumors, failed legal battles, a few freelance PR gigs under another name, occasional angry op-eds. She had wanted a throne. She had gotten exile. Sitting in my new office, I sometimes imagined walking past the glass-walled rooms of my old life. Imagined catching someone's eye and seeing recognition, shame, or indifference. I thought about revenge, and how it had tasted at the moment of exposure. Hot, decisive, but mixed with a bitterness I hadn't expected. Justice had come to some degree, but it was messy and human, not the satisfying cinematic finish I'd imagined. One evening, as rain traced paths down the office window, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number popped up. You did well. But remember, power finds a way. I smiled, a slow, tired thing. Power did find a way. That was the lesson. It also taught me what I wanted going forward. Not a seat at a corrupted table, but a voice that could call out when those tables wobbled. I poured myself a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, sat back and let the rain sound like a slow erasure of the past's harsh edges. Revenge had been a storm that taught me what I was willing to destroy to be set right. In the end, the thing I'd stolen back wasn't a title or a job. It was my name, my dignity, the knowledge that I wouldn't be erased. And though the world was never clean, full of hidden deals and quiet threats, there was a small, steady light in knowing I had acted. Not for spectacle, but because someone had to. As I closed my laptop, I realized the last surprising lesson. Sometimes the person you become while taking revenge is more important than the revenge itself. I had been changed, hardened, yes, but also clarified. Outside, somewhere beyond the rain and under the ordinary noise of the city, life continued. New players would come and play the old games, but I'd learned to read the moves. And if the next time someone tried to steal what was mine, or worse, steal someone else's, there would be someone ready to stand up and say, quietly, not this time.